I'm presenting with Casey Kaelman. We're both researchers at the Union of Concerned Scientists. We're going to be telling you some basic information about the COVID-19 vaccine, like what does the science say on it? And all of our sources are coming from official sources, you know, like the CDC and the FDA. So these kind of official government sources. So who are we? So we're representing the Union of Concerned Scientists. This is a group that was founded about 50 years ago. It's a science advocacy group trying to promote science-based decision-making in various areas. Casey and I work on a variety of different issues, but one of the things that we're focused in on is the pandemic response, making sure that science is at the forefront of every decision that the government is making to protect people from this deadly virus. So the other thing to note is that UCS is not affiliated with any pharma companies. We don't get money from pharma companies. We don't get money from government agencies. So we don't have any financial stakes in any of these things. So I'm Anita Desikan. I have a master's in public health from George Washington University and a master's in science from Drexel University. I have 8.5 years of public health research. 2.5 of those years have been at UCS. And I'm presenting to you from California, although I usually live in Washington, DC. My background is I'm Indian American. I'm a daughter of immigrants who moved to this country about 50 years ago. And a fun fact about me is I'm also a Fulbright scholar. So I taught English in Malaysia, in a rural part of Malaysia several years back. And Casey, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Casey Kaelman, and I also have a master's in public health from George Washington University. Anita and I actually went through the same program, just a little bit apart from each other. And I have been at UCS for about a year now. I'm originally from outside of Chicago, and I went to school in Wisconsin, so I'm also a Midwesterner. And a fun fact about me is that my roommate is a professional baker, so she comes home every day and I get fresh bread.
Oh man, Casey, you're making us all jealous. All right, so one question we wanted to address right away is how people can place their trust in the COVID-19 vaccines. And we're thinking about communities of color in particular. So it's natural that there's going to be the mistrust of medical professionals, especially from people of color. It's understandable, it's expected, it's even rational. There's been a long legacy of this. And so 2 examples of this atrocious legacy is the Tuskegee syphilis study. So this is a study that was started in the 1930s and lasted for 40 years. And it was featuring participants who were African-American from low-income backgrounds who happened to have the disease syphilis. And for 40 years, they were denied effective treatments. People died as a result of these scientists not allowing the participants to be able to get treated for their syphilis. People, their families also got affected as well. Sorry, just if anyone is, can everyone mute their microphones just for better clarity? So just wanted to give that as mentioned. The other example here is Henrietta Lacks. So she's a woman who died in the 1950s, African-American woman from a low-income background living in Baltimore, Maryland. She had a very, very aggressive form of cancer. And so she went to her doctors at Johns Hopkins University, and they treated her. But they also took her cells from her body. They gave it to several scientific colleagues, and it just so happened her cells have a property that's made it responsible for hundreds and hundreds of scientific breakthroughs. And some people did make money off of it, but it wasn't Henrietta Lacks. She died from the disease. She wasn't informed that this occurred, by the way, and her family wasn't compensated at all until I think only last year a fund was in their name. So this is an example of just racism in action, to be honest with you. And so this led to incredible reforms in the scientific community, especially after the 70s. So one example is the Office of Human Resource Protection. It's a group in the Department of Health and Human Services. One of their main jobs is just to protect people who are in scientific research studies, to make sure they're okay, to make sure that they're not being harmed. We also, congressional law and this group also created protections across every university and research center you can imagine. So every scientist who has an idea about what study they want to conduct, they have to be able to get permission from a group of people thinking about the ethics of it. And this includes scientists and community members. And there's also just a higher standard of safety for vaccine trials. So just things to note. And I'll pass it to Casey.
Sure. So the first question that we wanted to answer is just a broad idea of how vaccines work. So basically, a vaccine uses your body's natural defense mechanisms and immune system to spark, well, it introduces an unharmful part of the virus in order to spark an immune response. And this allows your body to build up defenses and create a long-term memory that will allow your body to fight the virus when it comes into contact with it, kind of in the wild or in your daily life. And there are some more resources listed here if you're interested. Highly recommend the video from ABC. And so if we look specifically at the COVID-19 vaccines, there are 3 different types that are being researched in large-scale trials or have been approved by the FDA. The first type presents the body with a harmless piece of the virus that causes COVID-19. And this has been used for vaccines such as Hep B or whooping cough. So if you've been vaccinated in the past and you have followed the recommended vaccinations, then you've likely had this type of vaccine already. The second type uses a weakened live version of a different virus to transport some of the genetic material from COVID-19. So it's basically taking kind of the bones and the structure from a different virus that is not harmful, and then introducing it to the body so that it can more or less pretend to be COVID-19, and your body can develop a memory and know how to fight against it in the future. And this is the vaccine that Johnson & Johnson has developed, and it has also been used for the Ebola vaccine and many other vaccines. And the third type, you've probably heard of this one, mRNA. I feel like it's been in the news a lot. So mRNA vaccines teach our cells how to make a specific protein that end up triggering an immune response from our body. And this has been used for things like flu, Zika, rabies, as well as cancer treatments. If you've ever heard of a cancer treatment that harnesses your body's immune system to fight against the cancer, this is likely what they were referring to. And this third type is the kind of vaccine that Pfizer and Moderna have created. Oh, and we just want to emphasize that none of these vaccines can give you COVID-19 and none of them interact with your DNA.
Thanks, Casey. So I'll give you some more specifics on the data of how the COVID vaccines work. So there are 2 that have been approved, Pfizer, Moderna, and 1 vaccine that's undergoing review, which is the Johnson. So tens of thousands of people have been tested with these vaccines, and they've shown evidence of effectiveness and safety. So just to give some primers, Moderna and Johnson & Johnson are been tested in people who are 18 and older, while Pfizer is being tested in people 16 and older. Pfizer and Moderna have 2 doses, while Johnson & Johnson will have 1. And Pfizer and Moderna have a 95% effectiveness, while Johnson & Johnson has 66%. So let's go into what that means, that number 66%. Should I be concerned that it doesn't work as well? So all 3 of these vaccines are considered very good at preventing the type of COVID symptoms you really, really don't want to get: hospitalization, death, those types of things. Johnson & Johnson in particular can stop about 85% of those severe symptoms from occurring. And to give you an idea, the FDA, back in July of last year, when they're trying to figure out, what guidelines can we set for COVID-19 vaccines, they said that it should stop severe disease in at least 50% of people. And so this obviously goes beyond that threshold. And it's also flu vaccines, just to give you an idea, they're usually about 40 to 60% effective. And yet that number is enough to kind of stop flu epidemics. There's also some research about a 2-shot schedule for Johnson & Johnson going on right now. So are they safe? All 3 have shown to be safe, and it should be noted that most reactions to a vaccine occur within 6 weeks, while the participants were followed for 8 weeks. And the common side effects are things you might expect from a flu vaccine, like pain at the injection site, fatigue, and headaches. And the Moderna and Pfizer companies are currently testing in children 12 and older to see if it's safe. Are they safe and effective for people who are like me? So I'll focus in on the Pfizer Moderna one, but Johnson & Johnson is reporting something similar here. So equally safe and effective across age groups, gender, and racial and ethnic groups. These are some of the racial and ethnic breakdowns. I'll just focus in on African-American individuals. So for the Pfizer vaccine trials, about 4,000 people were tested, which equates to about 10% of the population of the study population. And in the Moderna vaccine, this 3,000 African-American individuals were tested. This equates to about, again, 10% of the individuals. So, and the results are pretty similar to that 95% effectiveness and safety levels. There was also some other data looking at women and men, so about half for each were tested. 65 and older, 21 or 24% of the population were 65 and older in these studies. People did have underlying health conditions. They really wanted to make sure it was safe for them. So 46% in the Pfizer study and 22% in the Moderna study. And one of the conditions was diabetes, so that equaled about 8-9% in both groups. Are there other vaccines being tested? The answer is absolutely yes. This is just to give you an idea of vaccines being looked at. There are over 60 at this point. 20 have been going into these large scale clinical trials. So these are just examples in the leading few. Do they continue to test for safety after it's over? Yes, absolutely. The CDC, FDA, and the vaccine manufacturers constantly monitor the vaccines even after they've been approved. And I'll just highlight one particular way they do that. So there's something called the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System. So an individual like you and me, if we happen to have a vaccine and we get like a really, really bad reaction, like, you know, something that just really bad, right? We can report it to them and scientists can look through the data. They're looking every day at the data, trying to make sure that, you know, it acts as an early warning system for any potential safety issues. So in the past, vaccines have been considered very safe. So there have been very few recalls, but, you know, there have been precautionary measures in case of a potential issue arises. So this is a very valuable system, and there's a few others like it as well. So a lot of people have been reporting